My legal name is, and has always been, Colton. As a child, I was backup baby. The concept of a backup child may be nothing new to you. Plenty of parents quite candidly admit to creating a second child to serve as a safety net so that, should something happen to the original child, the sibling would be there to fill the void. That is already quite a hollow and horrifying motivation for bringing a human into the world, and the purpose of my birth was far more terrible. I was born into 2005, 18 years after my brother, Colton, my namesake. In 2003, he had been diagnosed with juvenile ALS, a rare form of Lou Gehrig's disease, a sickness that degenerates one's motor neurons until all muscles have atrophied, until the sufferer can no longer breathe. Despite what you may be thinking, I wasn't created to provide spare parts for my dying brother. I have heard of parents doing such a twisted thing, but I was created to replace Colton, and not as a new person, as a carbon copy of him. Colton was their beloved son, and they sought a way of keeping him alive, in some deranged manner. I understand why even parents as cruel as ours loved him so dearly. Colton was sweet, smart, and strong, that winning trifecta. He achieved greatness before entirely losing the motor function necessary to continue in his field. Becoming a prominent medical researcher, I think he would have changed the world. Tales of my brother's greatness were ingrained into my mind from the moment I was able to form memories. Mother described Colton as a bright light that had very little time to shine on this earth, and I agreed with her. He was so immensely compassionate, wanting only the best for me, and I wanted only the best for him. I think, if it hadn't been for his disease, he would have been able to save me. By 2009, Colton lived in the city, fulfilling his dreams as a researcher in spite of his limbs and extremities stiffening. He would return home fairly frequently. Mother and father were quite insistent upon it, though they supported my brother's move to the city, wanting him to achieve grand things. My parents also wanted as much time with the golden child as possible. Around this time, when I was 4, my parents' intentions started to come to light. Colton was no longer around, and their true hellishness emerged. I had been Colton Jr. when my big brother was around, but as soon as he left home, backup baby, father called, "Come here." As a naive boy at the time, I eagerly ran towards the pop-thrilled man, thinking little of this new name. Backup baby sounded quite cutesy and endearing. "I'm looking over your report," the man growled as I stood before him, beaming, and I gulped, noting the stocky piece of white card on his lap, the sturdy school report listing results from recent tests, an A in English, and BS in maths and science. Father barked, "Next term, I expect you to receive an A for each and every core subject. Do you understand, boy?" A few months later, however, only my English grade had upped. I'd felt rather proud of that A. The father looked incensed. "Sorry, oi," I whispered. You'll come with me." The man finished for me, with a chilled edge to the instruction. Then father shot up from the sofa, seized me by the wrist, and yanked my screaming, squirming body through the lobby and towards the basement door. Within a moment, that man, who was supposed to love me, had transformed into a nightmare. It is my first memory of true terror, and one that pales in comparison to the hell which would follow. The basement door flung open to reveal a black cavity below our home, a place which had been beneath my feet for my first 4 years of life. Yet no more than a door in the lobby. I hadn't ever questioned what lay behind it. To a child's eyes, untold hell hid in the basement's dark recesses, and nothing I would experience down there helped to quell that fear. M.A. I shrieked as father locked the basement door behind us, before shoving me down the groaning wooden steps. "What have I told you?" A man hissed as he shoved me more forcefully. I near tripped down the last handful of steps, scuffing my fluffy socks against the hard floor below. Then came a thump on the back of my head, which drew a few tears from my eyes. And finally, father asked, "We are mother and father. Who are you, boy?" I sniffled. "Colton." That answered me a firmer backhand across the back of my crown. "WHOA are you?" he screamed as we stood in the blackness at the bottom of the stairs. All that existed in the void of a basement was father's hot, sour breath against my neck. I croaked, head whirring from the force of the thump, and started to give the answer he wanted. "Back up, baby," father finished. "You are the continuation of Colton, but you are not him. You are a vessel, Father tugged a cord dangling from the ceiling to reveal a cluttered, squalid space. Earth's mirrored, unshaded bulb cast a grubby, orange glow that barely scraped the edges of the room, a basement containing a couple shelving units and countless stacks of unlabeled cardboard boxes. My father brushed past me, flicked an empty box off an old oakwood table, then dragged the furnishing into the middle of the room. "Stand here," he ordered, pointing behind the filthy desk. He gave the surface a quick dust with his sleeve, which did little more than smear the grime across the wood. I nodded and did as I was told, knees knocking as I waited as the other side of the table. Meanwhile, my father rummaged through miscellaneous objects on a shelving unit and eventually found it or an open stack of A4 paper. He removed a few sheets, plucked a blunt pencil from a rusty pot of stationery, then threw the items onto the dusted table before me. "How long is your summer break?" he asked. 6 weeks, I answered meekly. "Father, what is 42 days?" he interrupted softly, as wandering across the horrid room. "For 42 days, you will study down here. This is your school, your cafeteria, your bedroom." My little eyes wide and confused held. "Bedroom? In September, you will enter year 1 of school," he continued, ignoring my question. "On your first report card of the year, I will see 3 grades of A or higher. Do you understand?" I trembled, horrified by the prospect of spending an entire summer in that underground prison. "Father, I need a chair. I need a bed." He barreled towards me in response, then coiled his fingers around my neck. I would have let loose a screech if one could have slipped out of my constricted throat. "You will stand," my father croaked into my face, putrid breath reeking of tobacco and pale ale. "Only whilst you sleep will you rest your feet." He bound my shrieking lips with duct tape, then left me down there to rot. Later that evening, Mother slipped a plate of salmon and several school books through the narrow basement window, leaving them atop it all tower of cardboard boxes. And then Father returned to the basement an hour or so afterwards. I thought he'd come to his senses, ready to revoke the punishment and allow me back upstairs. But the man ignored my muffled cries and screams of horror. Then he sat 3 small dolls, each 6 inches in height, on an empty shelf of the unit opposite my table. Handcrafted, porcelain monstrosities with antiquated, floral designs and bald heads. "These are backup babysitters," Father whispered, pointing at the thing's black, beady eyes, glassy, reflective spheres that may have been cameras. They may, equally, have been nothing but empty threats made to cause me sleepless nights. "Do not touch your sitters if you wish to keep those fingers." My gagged wails earned me a stern look from Father, who told me very firmly that I ought to be quiet, that Colton would be visiting soon, and Father wouldn't hesitate to bring out the cane. I realize now that I should have made a racket. My brother would have done something. Of course, as a terrified 4-year-old, I had neither the stomach nor the intellect to challenge Father, so I complied. The following weekend, whilst Colton stayed and spent time with our loving parents above, I remained in blackness, stifling balls, staring into only those dolls' black eyes in the darkness, which reflected a glint of moonlight pouring through the basement window. I'm not sure what explanation Father gave Colton with regards to my absence. A school trip, perhaps. When Mother passed meals into the basement, she would whisper that Colton didn't ask a thing about me, but I didn't believe that. They may well have believed it, as they always loathed the love that my brother showed towards me. They did not want him to see me as a sibling, or even a human. After all, I was only ever backup baby. For those 6 weeks, I sat on cardboard boxes until Mother or Father walked near the basement. Then I would stand again to avoid being reprimanded. Over those summer months, as children of the free world laughed above the basements, I studied and wasted away, subsisting on meager portions of salmon and peas and bread. On my birthday, I was given 2 slices. When the first day of the new school year came, the basement door finally clicked open, and I rushed up the stairs to embrace Mother in a hug, bawling as I did so. And a few months later, the end-of-term report came back with 3 resoundingly positive grades, A, and A. "No A in English this year," Father muttered disapprovingly. "No matter. You may sleep above." Colton. Father paused, so close to calling me Colton, which gave me a twinge of pride. "Until Back to your room, he hissed, nodding upstairs. It'll need dusting. I had severed social connections with classmates and friends, so as to spend every waking hour studying. After that stay in the basement, my stomach, joints, and skull had ached far more than was healthy or natural for a 5-year-old. I didn't want to be banished to the basement ever again. Didn't ever want to see those 3 sitters again. Years later, in 2016, Colton lost the motor functions necessary to live independently, so had to move home. My brother had become immobile and capable only of uttering a few staggered, struggling words. He was carried down to the kitchen by my father at dinner time, but otherwise spent all of his time upstairs. My parents claimed that care was easier that way, but truthfully they simply wanted to keep him away from me, away from the awfulness that father wished to inflict upon me. The basement had been only the tip of the iceberg. One night, whilst I pretended to sleep in my room, mother and father spoke on the landing, and the terrible truth poured free. We have wasted 11 years of our lives on him, mother moaned, and that are how well we mold his mind, or body. He lacks Colton's face, eyes, smile. I know, father whispered. You have said as much for years. Sorry, mother timidly apologized. No, my dear, I meant only that. Since you first mentioned it, I have been searching. He replied. Searching? She croaked. Colton hasn't long left in this world. Father said, so we must act quickly. Mother winced. Please, dear, I don't like it when you call it that way. Why else didn't we have the backup? They hissed. You have done so much for us, love, and I have spent for years trying to repay the favor. At long last, I have found someone who might help us. Found someone? Mother repeated. Father shifted his weight on the floorboards outside my bedroom door, and I tightened the duvet cover under my chin, shuddering uncontrollably at the thought of them finding me eavesdropping. Found a man with the requisite skills. Father explained. What have you done? Mother gasped. We promised that we would never say a word to another soul. Who have you told about our situation? A man who will take our secret to the grave. Responded Father icily. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Colton sitting at the kitchen table. He seemed just as baffled as me that father had gone to the effort of carrying him downstairs for breakfast. That was a treat reserved for dinner. Colton, I cried excitedly, giving my older brother a warm hug. Why are you down here? He shrugged ungiving shoulders, grunting painfully. It had become difficult for him to string together sentences or move his body. Mother? Father? I asked. Why is Colton here? Our parents simply laughed off the question, offering me wide, unfeeling smiles. Then mother began to feed cornflakes to Colton. I shrugged my shoulders, tucking into my own bowl. But as darkness ate the edges of my vision, and whose eyes filled my body, my brain finished waking up. I remembered the conversation I had caught the night before. And Mama, Colton suddenly mumbled, head lolling forwards. Shush, she whispered in return, walking over to him. Sleep now. The last thing I heard, once my vision had faded, was father's voice in my ear, tunneling down with that pungent breath. You will look upon us differently when you next open your eyes. I woke to the stammering sounds of my brother. Mama, huh? Papa, pon. What? He croaked. Vocal cords mostly functionless. My face felt numb, yet I felt a slight strain behind my eyes and a nerve artificial from the neck upwards. As I pulled my eyelids open, there was an unmistakable difference to the way in which I saw the world around me. Through blurry vision, I sensed that I was lying on a bed, or a table, and that I was in the place I dreaded most, the basement. He's alive, whispered mother from a chair beside me, and then I made out a middle-aged, white-coated man sitting on a chair, just past the edge of my bed. But mother wasn't talking to him, she was ignoring him. As a matter of fact, regardless of his mumbled, incoherent groans from a gaping mouth, I worked hard to adjust my eyes, and then I realized something which horrified me. The stranger had no tongue. I tried to produce some kind of haunted cry for help, but nothing would come out of my depleted body, and as I focused on the man opposite me, I realized that he wasn't sitting at all. He was bound to the chair, for he had no way of sitting. His legs had been severed midway through the thighs. I squirmed as I screeched inwardly. unleashing only a feeble puff of air from my weak lungs and lips of my drowsy body. Instead, I twisted my head to the source of the voice that had woken me. Facing my brother, he lay on something akin to an operating table, a white bandage over his eyes, stained with splotches of red. Blood was pouring out of the sides. Terrifying thoughts filled my mind of what it all might mean, what might have happened. Then came the plodding of footsteps down the basement stairs from the man Mother had called. "Do we think the surge and did well?" Father asked. Mother sniffled and nodded. "He looks beautiful." And she held up a mirror to my eyes. And I screamed at the foreign, blue things in my skull, precious things that belonged to Colton, the golden child, the one they supposedly loved, who lay on the table beside me without restraints. As his muscles had given up long ago, he wouldn't have been able to flee if he had tried. Certainly wouldn't have been able to save me. "Why Island, Papa Puss?" my brother croaked. Blind to the world, I watched Father walk over to his son and place a tender hand on his leg. But his eyes were on me. "So that you may survive, my prize. So that you may continue to see the world and live through him." All of a sudden, the empty-mouthed surgeon screamed, rocked his chair backwards, then crashed into the shelving unit behind him, and the trio of porcelain awls, my old sitters, fell. All three smashed when they hit the floor, and, to my eyes, long white sticks came loose. "It is sacred or Mother howled, rising to her feet and yelping as she dashed to the mute, legless surgeon lying bound to that toppled chair on the floor. What followed was just beyond my line of view, for I could only tilt my head slightly to get a view of the floor. I saw the dull remnants, and the surgeon's lower half, but not what happened above. I heard it though, the stomp of a shoe against flesh and bone, along with the surgeon's few frail moans, each frailer than the last. Seconds later, the only sounds he made were wet squelch chests and snaps. Father placed a hand on Mother's shoulder. "It is over now. He disrespected our girls," she hissed. "What is happening?" My brother moaned from beside me. "Girl after girl after girl," Father sighed, eyeing the pile of white sticks amidst the broken porcelain fragments. A pool of red was spreading towards them from the surgeon's corpse. The fourth time was the charm. As I eyed the three broken dolls on the floor, and their little white fragments within, I began to hyperventilate until fear gripped me as I contemplated the unimaginable. And as Father and Mother bounced upstairs, laughing deliriously at the success of their deranged operation, I was left lying there in the basement with my grunting brother and the three skeletal baby remains. At some point in the night, Colton's grunting stopped, as did his breathing. There were streaks of dry blood on his face, trailing back to the white bandage over his empty eye sockets. I assumed that his surgery must have been botched by the abducted, mutilated surgeon, who had been forced to perform the operation under duress. Colton must have succumbed to blood loss. Whatever the case, I was glad for my brother, glad that his suffering was over, glad that he didn't have to suffer along with the knowledge of how grotesque our parents had truly been. The next morning, in a dozy state, I found myself being dragged out of the darkened basement by Father, and I came out as Colton, a blue-eyed, athletic, straight-A student. My parents never called me back-up baby again. Most horribly of all, I have never once, in the years since, considered running for my life. Even this story is one I tell with a mixture of false names and great trepidation, as Father gave me a very stern warning upon pulling me out of the basement. There are two options, be Colton or be with the sitters. Even now, as a 20-year-old man preparing to leave home, I do not feel as if I have truly found a way of escaping from them. Trauma is a powerful restraint. Father is happy to let me out into the world, for he knows that I will forever be too terrified of him and Mother to say or do anything. Too terrified that, no matter how big I grow, I may end up encased in porcelain too.